I don't want to do a Days of Your Lives thing, but I do want to ask about a sentence that you wrote in your own biography on the Studio G website. I think you wrote it, unless someone wrote it for you.
I had no ghostwriter, I can guarantee you.
Which would be
that.
weirder.
That would be strange, yeah.
When you were 5 years old, you wanted to be a used car salesman.
Used car salesman or a rock star?
See, you left the second part out, right?
Yeah.
So what about being a used car salesman?
I think I was just really obsessed with cars at that point. Like as like a 4 or 5 year old, I had pictures of them, you know, cut out from like Car and Driver all over my room. I mean, like cars are fine
cool.
now. Yeah,
they're cool.
Well, they're cool. I mean, to me now, I'm just more like, do I have to move the car? You know, I don't really care about them now. But you know, we didn't have like a Camaro in the garage, but we had a lot of music in the house.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the psychology of that, though, in a way, if the reason you wanted to be a car salesman was that you loved cars, there is a really technical, geeky aspect to machinery and cars, and you're kind of still in that as an engineer. Yeah,
I'll get in the engine room.
Right.
You know what I mean?
What kind of, you did also say rock star, right? So what kind of music did you hear when you were young? Not the music your parents played, but the music that you first decided, like, I'm going to buy this record, or I'm going to go. The first band or person that identified with you to the point where you wanted to do that.
That would be, the first would be, I remember hearing Nirvana in '93 when I was just starting to play guitar. And I grew up with a lot of music in the house, and music that I still love. My parents had a huge blues and jazz collection and just everything. But I remember hearing Nirvana and literally thinking what you just said, like, this is my music. I'm going to go out and buy this. I can learn how to play this. So you go online, you download the tabs that are completely wrong, you know, and you play them completely wrong for like 3 months.
They were definitely wrong.
And that was, you know, hearing that. And then oddly enough, the first Nirvana record I bought was Incesticide, which I still love it to this day. Not only because it's like nostalgia and but the songs are all incredible. And I just remember learning that, or trying to learn it, you know, in my room. Like that was the stopgap, like B-sides after Nevermind came out, when Geffen was like, oh shit, like we gotta put something else out, like before they started doing Utero. And you know, then I went backwards and forwards from there. But that was the first, you know, I mean, that was like '93, so that was like prime grunge era.
Was the thing about Nirvana, was it the accessibility of the fact that Kurt's not shredding, or the way they're singing? Was that what made it feel like it was accessible to you? Or was it like the social commentary, the way that he was a rock star, they were rock stars, you know, the kind of Gen X anti-establishment aspect of it?
I gotta say, I mean, those are things I definitely thought about and considered later. I think it was more of an emotional response, like a gut emotional response. There was something that I connected with. There was just something very visceral in a way that, you know, when you're 11 and everything is changing, you know, I just remember it really, really hitting me emotionally.
The town you grew up in.
Yeah.
Coming to New York City, it's interesting because, you know, it's a fast-paced place. There's something's always happening. But I think I'm a transplant as well. And I think that you do retain some of where you came from when you come here, right? Which is what makes this place beautiful, is that everybody brings a little bit of where they're from with them, right?
Yeah.
What do you retain from your upbringing?
That's a very good question.
You might not really think about it all the time, but is there something that, like, you've recognized differentiates you from native New Yorkers in your temperament, in your way of thinking?
You know, I mean, it's tying it in, obviously, to what I've chosen to do with my my life's work, I guess. But being patient, being very patient, and in a way that you're not going to find that all the time in a city.
That's very true.
You know, you can drive one block and meet some very impatient people. I get impatient too. I'm sure you can cite examples of that. But like, I think I was taught that at a young age, and I think that it was just Hopewell Junction is, I'm sure it's changing. It was, when I was growing up, it was extremely suburban. It was like cul-de-sac. You know, you got to drive 10 minutes to do anything. And that anything you're going to do is like, you want to go to Dunkin' Donuts? And
Dunkin'.
It's like, Dunkin'. Yeah, let's go to Dunkin'. It's like 9:30 at night. I'm going to get like a coffee culotta that has like, 6 pounds of sugar in it. And then, I don't know, maybe we'll smoke cigarettes, but like I won't because it's my mom's car. But we'll just kind of stand there and then we'll go home. So the point of all that is like there wasn't that much going on. It was a slower pace.
That is a good thing to have in engineering and production, being patient. Yeah, that can't be bad. How did you first get into engineering? And not the process of it, but more of what made you decide this was the route you wanted to take? Well,
funnily enough, it came from playing guitar. So I have a business degree. Yeah. I didn't go to music school. I have a business degree with an emphasis in marketing.
So you could start your own series of car dealerships.
Exactly. Well, I wasn't thinking along the car dealership line. The graduated, went to college, and my parents were like, just finish, get a degree, and then you can figure out. Which by the way, very grateful for that.
That's so cool.
Incredible support, and still incredibly supportive. But the thing was like, get your degree, and then you have that. Graduated college. I was like, I don't think I can put on a suit and go to interviews. I just didn't know what to do. So I started working in a music store. In Wappingers Falls, New York, music store alumni.
Music store alumni. PTSD. I don't know if you have PTSD from your time at the music store. I definitely do.
Well, you mentioned, am I allowed to say it?
No, okay, I don't work there anymore.
Yeah, that's right. They're not sponsoring this shit.
No, I can't get fired anymore.
Yeah.
I've been promoted to customer from both Sam Ash and Guitar Center.
Oh my God. See, yeah, those are tough places.
Rough stuff.
I had a couple friends that worked at Guitar Center, like when they first moved here, and it was just like complete nightmare. I worked at a place that I will still do my business, not Sam Ash or Guitar Center. Ladies and gentlemen, if you need musical equipment of any kind, Alto Music in either Middletown, New York. Yeah. And I worked at the one in Wappingers Falls. And I didn't really have PTSD, like there were the usual sort of like blues lawyers and,
the weekend warrior guys.
The tire kickers is like, could I like play that $16,000 Taylor? And then they like sit down, like they like play some like crazy finger picking thing while they're like looking right at you. And I'm like, are you trying to like impress me? Because I would be really impressed if you bought this, because then I would get a commission. At some point, one of the store's managers was like, hey, I think you would really like this guy, Chris's music. He needs a guitar player. And I was like, well, I'm living at home with my parents. I'm not really playing guitar that much. There wasn't that much of a music scene in the big city. There's Poughkeepsie, okay?
Oh, Poughkeepsie.
Which the Chance Theater, wonderful place. Long story short, I ended up auditioning for Chris's band. We became friends. He's a couple years older than I am, few. He was already engineering at a place called Millbrook Sound Studios. And he also had a little studio in his basement. So like I would just go over and hang out there all the time with his wife and his brother-in-law, and we just all became fast friends. And I had like the first M-Box, like with the worst latency ever.
Woo!
Before that, and a Yamaha 4-track before that. And like I messed around at home, but it was more like, let me record this. And like I didn't care about how it got into the thing I was recording it on, or like I was just like, well, I don't know, maybe I can do, I recorded a kind of bad version of this song. All right, cool. Like I would just sort of use that as like, I'll just learn these guitar parts. But that's a very long way of answering your question, because in that little basement studio that my friend Chris had, which he would have like, he was already starting to produce and engineer he would have people come over, and, one session he would do a hip hop session. He was like making like, really like awesome beats. And then he would have like a pop rock session going on. And since I was hanging out there so much, I'm seated now, but I'm 6'4", and he,
Yeah,
you know,
you are tall.
I'm yeah, a huge person. And I was a huge person back then too. But he had this little control room, and I couldn't stand up in it. So it was
Oh, no.
it was it was in a this house in Poughkeepsie, and they dug out the foundation or whatever, the dirt for the live room, but the control room, like, so I would be like hanging in there a lot, being like, because I would always give the chairs to like whoever he was working with. It wasn't a big place. It was like maybe like from here to the wall, and like from that wall to this rack. Not very large.
Yeah, no.
And then obviously a low ceiling, and I would be like, oh man, that sounds awesome. But
Sideways.
But that's where I saw not only like it clicked. I was like, wait a minute, I'm seeing like how all these different things are put together. And I was such an avid music listener and music fan and music player person, musician, if you will, that I was listening to all these records all the time, and still do, but I wasn't really thinking about how any of it came to be for the most part. Yeah. And you just start to see, like, I felt like I just got like a sideways peek into the door of like, oh, wow, like watching all this be constructed and watching, we're talking about before, the personal side of it, like watching someone have people skills and be able to work with somebody and make them feel comfortable and make them also feel like they're there to help the person along, not just be like, yeah, this was in the days before iPhones, but like not just be like, yeah, whatever, like I don't, okay, yeah, you can do another take.
That is not how to get the job.
No, and exactly. And I kind of like was subconsciously like lapping all of that stuff up for a while. Like I would just go hang if Chris was doing a session. I think he would call me. I don't even know if we were like texting at that point, and he'd be like, hey, you want to come over and get in my car and drive 20 minutes, whatever, and go hang out and just like watch whatever. Like I was game for whatever. He's like, do you want to go put, this Royer on this guitar cab? I was like, awesome. I put it on, a Royer is 121. For our viewers, it is not, the element is not here as it is in our handheld mics. It's a side address mic. So I put the Royer up on the guitar cab. I'm like, yeah, awesome. Like I did the cable really well. I'm really learning. And I pointed it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Have you ever watched, I've seen this on YouTube a lot, interviews with people?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
yeah,
front on the side.
Yeah.
It's
like the SM7, like up here. And I'm
super rough.
Yeah, and then I'm like, no, am I kind of being a snob about this? But I was like, you're doing this on video. Like you should maybe figure out like which way this is pointing.
Somebody should have told you before you spent time editing this. Yeah. No, so it happens a lot, is what I'm saying.
Exactly.
That is not just a you thing.
No, and like from there, and it was fine. We all laughed about it, but it's like that's. A very low stakes example of how you learn. It's like, oh, okay. I didn't have everybody screaming at me about it, thankfully.
You eventually moved to the city,
yes.
Obviously, because we're here.
Mm-hmm.
And not very long after you moved here, you ended up playing with Psychic TV, which is crazy. Because what's funny about the first time I was hearing your name around before, they're like, this is Jeff Berner. He used to play with Psychic TV. That's kind of the first thing everyone would tell me. And then he's an engineer. He used to play with Psychic TV. And to me, that means a lot, right? Because I am into electronic music, industrial music, and obviously this is like from the legacy of the gods. This was that something that you were aware of when you got into this? Did you have a sort of mental picture of the history of that?
I didn't have the scope of it. I was aware of the band. I didn't have the full scope of like basically what you're saying, like the sort of like the legacy, the history, and the amount of work that one person produced. There are so
Out
many
of
psychic
control.
TV records. There are so many. The first record came out when I was 1.
Yeah, that's the thing is
You know?
you were young,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you always have this initiation where you like something, but you're maybe too young to have experienced all of it, and then you get an older person coming in like, you don't even know what you're talking about, man. You don't know what Coombe transmissions is. You know what I
Exactly,
mean?
exactly.
Which happened to me at one point because I was like so into Throbbing Gristle and I had a Throbbing Gristle shirt, and someone's like, oh, blah blah blah, Coombe transmission. I don't know what that is.
That
Right?
that some guy, so somebody tried to do that to me at a psychic TV show when I was like waiting on the side to like there was some guy like that was dressed up in full, sort of like topi gear, and he was like. I was not, I wasn't like, well, what do you mean? I'm Jeff Berner. He was just like talking to me about it. He's like, dude, like you probably don't even like you don't even like know like the entire. I think he actually said the entire Coombe transmissions thing. And
because that's always the thing.
But
That's always the thing they say.
Yeah, yeah.
It's happened to me too.
And I looked at him and I was like, I was like, enjoy the show.
Yeah.
And I felt a little egotistical saying that, but I was like, first of all, like don't do that to people in general. Secondly,
it's
like
not cool.
Maybe you don't know what's going on if you're like kind of giving the guitar player who's been in the band like 10 years at that point shit about it. So
that's after a decade of being in the band.
Yeah.
So this guy knew you were in the
yeah,
band.
yeah.
People are crazy.
I mean,
People are crazy.
The band again. That band's no. The first record came out the year I was born, 1982. I knew a couple records, and I knew the place vaguely, like the place that they sort of inhabited, and I knew Jen's name, but that was like complete luck, and that almost I was hired to replace a guitar player. The previous guitar player to go to Europe, and Jen would announce every night from the stage that it was her last tour because she wanted to focus on visual media. It was such a perfect scenario in so many ways because we weren't away for like 6 months. We would go out to Europe for 3 weeks, and then Jen would be like, all right, I have a thing I got to prepare for an exhibition, so we'll maybe get together a couple times, but there's no more dates booked for a few months. Yeah. So it was great. But in those few months, guess what I did? I was in the studio making records. It's like I couldn't believe how lucky I was.
That's amazing. Being a guy who comes from this small town and working at a music store and getting into engineering and making records, but now you're in this experience, which has got to be there's got to be somewhat of a culture shock here. Did you change with this culture shock, or did you just kind of observe and go, wow, this is different?
I definitely changed. I mean, my eyes were open. I also, I think a lot of it, like I got to see a lot of the world. But what I always talk about with people, like with other touring musicians, it's like the sense of gratitude of no matter what level you're touring on, it's like I get to go to this place and play music. I get to go and travel to this place on the merit of being able to play music for people, which like that has always just meant a lot to me.
Yeah, so that changed you.
Oh my God.
Absolutely, because you got to see the world.
Yeah.
And then just dealing with Genesis and seeing the way that she lived and how she thought about things. Did any of that rub off on you?
I mean, yeah, it's hard to even sum up. I mean, Genesis was a revolutionary thinker, a revolutionary creator. I think someone who's like her, there. We always in the band we always referred to Jen as a her, but she. Jen's work is going to be studied like for years and years and years to come, and I believe that. And that's not me just saying it because I was in the band, but. Even the even closer stuff, that band for a long time was really like family. We laughed really hard together. And, touring is not, again, it's not all rosy, but we had such a good time together and we just loved being around each other. And that's like, that's the thing I am even more grateful for. It's like I got to tour, but, I'm sure that you've also been in situations where you're like, man, like this one person in the band is like, kind of just ruining this whole experience for us right now.
1,000%.
Yeah.
Always.
And that was, that for the longest time, like that just wasn't a thing. Like we were, I'm still really close with the bass player, my friend Alice, which I play like and produce and did her new record, her new project. The keyboardist, my friend John, is godfather to my child. So,
Yeah. So you guys really were
Yeah.
family and then still are family.
Yeah.
It's interesting because that time period, right? The entirety of the work of Genesis, you could say like 70s, 80s, 90s,
Yeah.
2000s, right? This was still sort of a time when, and the early 2000s debatable, but when there was a really deep appreciation for people that kind of told the entirety of the system that they're not playing the game. They're doing whatever they want.
Yeah.
And even if you didn't agree with them, it didn't really matter if you agreed with them, because there was this, okay, I don't like what they're saying, but I like that someone's saying it because it's not what they expect us to say. They, and it is definitely Genesis predates Gen X, but it is something that I feel like Gen X really appreciated, this like, idea of not selling out, not being a corporate Ponzi, being part of the corporate world, right?
Right.
It's hard to imagine that if Genesis were alive and we're like 20 years old now, right, and wanted to do any of the stuff that they did, like it's not the same climate. Like, how do you feel about somebody who's trying to carry on that legacy of basically disrupting everybody in a world where like that's maybe not appreciated anymore?
It's maybe not appreciated, and there's also, like, you're very right, the climate has changed. I wouldn't even know the roadmap to doing anything close to what Jen did, let alone be able, or like think about a way to do that now. That was a singular person, one of the most intelligent and one of the funniest people I've ever met. Hilarious.
In New York, you get a lot of people who ran into Jen and have stories about Genesis. What if you had a story you could tell somebody, just like one story that sums up Genesis as a person to you? Do you have a story you can remember?
Oh, man. Oh, yeah. Okay. We're going through airport security in Paris. I think it was Paris. I mean, because we were traveling with someone who was much older. It wasn't like fly in, do the show, leave, fly in, do a show. It's like we usually had a day between shows. It was a very relaxing thing. But I remember, like, we had to take an early flight, and I think we were all just kind of like hungover, tired, and just sort of like burnt from the road. And I went through security first, and they were asking Jen to take off the belt, and Jen was like, "No, I can't. I don't want to do that." Like, for whatever reason, just refused to do so, and said, "If I do that, my pants are going to fall down." And they're like, "No, madam, you must take off your belt." And tried to go through, "Madam, you must take off your belt." I know this isn't a New York story. That song. I still can't listen to that, but that's instant tears, folks. Anyway, so they're trying to get her to take off the belt. She's like, "All right, fine, I'll take off the belt." And I'm watching this whole thing. I'm done. Like, I already got my shoes on. I was like, I know. I'm just gonna,
what's going to happen.
What she's going to do. And she just rips her pants down and just walks through security, like kind of waddling. She goes, "Yeah." And they like this was like 8:30 in the morning too. Like the security people were less than pleased.
Yeah.
I think she threw one of her shoes, not at anybody, but sort of like threw. Like, she was just like, "No, this is ridiculous."
Yeah, but that's a great story. It's also like a testament to the type of person that everyone sees Genesis as. It's like somebody who was really like, "Fuck you" to what you're supposed to do, especially when they didn't feel like it was necessary.
Yeah, like,
right?
I mean, that's the smallest form of cultural disruption. She
Exactly.
She had many, many larger and more important forms, but you weren't you were not going to win on that one if you were asking her to do something like that. And she's like, no, I don't think so.
I was watching some interviews of Genesis in the period in which you were in the band, and one thing that she said was in this interview with Nardwuar, you know, the Canadian, he's hilarious, right? So in this interview, she said, most people are trying to succeed. We're not.
Yeah.
That, again, talking about the period in time, right?
Yeah.
That just is kind of the antithesis of what we're in now.
Yeah.
Right. Most people are trying to succeed. We're not.
We're not. We're not.
Did that carry over in the band? You felt that?
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, that was one of the biggest, things. And I'll tell you, when I joined, I think by the second tour, Jen got it in her head. She's like, we should all be like a motorcycle gang, you know, and wear like the denim cut-off vests and like, you know, like big like topi patches on the back. And I remember, like, I think we had to like bring them to rehearsal. Like, we're going to show them to each other at rehearsal. When we rehearsed at my old studio, she walks in and her big patch on the back, it just says "change," like on her shoulder blades. And to that end, she was always interested in doing something new. There was one occasion where we played Dreams Less Sweet front to back, but other than that, there was never a greatest hits set. Always wanted to do something new. We didn't play Godstar. I didn't play Godstar once with that band. She didn't want to play it. You know, we barely played. I think we snuck in a couple of the older tunes, like maybe towards the end of the band, but it was, if you were going to go to a psychic TV show at that point, for better or for worse, like you probably, unless you were up on that record, you probably were not going to know any of the songs. You were going to have an experience, and we were, you know, hopefully going to give you a good one. But no one was going to be playing Godstar. We weren't going to be doing their cover of Are You Experienced.
It's so interesting to think about that work and that project, and then the time that we're in now, which, even though isn't that far in the future, feels like it's so drastically different to that time, especially like the pushing of gender convention, right? And the pushing of like what you're expected to look like and present yourself, right? And deciding that, you know, you feel like you need to express yourself in a different way, even at later in your life, right? That's something that's still contentious now. I mean, I feel like it's more contentious and under attack more. I mean, and I would say my friends who are transgender would definitely agree that it's under attack now more than it was then, right? So you can't, like, it's hard because you can't speak for somebody, but I wonder, I know that they would still be fighting against that, obviously, you know, of the bigotry and whatnot.
We played Russia 4 or 5 times, Moscow and St. Petersburg. The last time we were there was a local, not like the, you know, I don't know, St. Petersburg Times, but there was some sort of local paper that called us homo fascists, and said that they were going to protest at our show. And I just remember Jen like hearing that, what the fuck is a homo-fascist? And, you know, like being like, and shrugging it off and like we played the show. But the point being like one would not believe, and it was so touching, and it also happened in other sort of Eastern Bloc countries that like, you know, I think there was not as much tolerance as there was for it, you know, in other parts of Western Europe. There were so many trans kids or, you know, kids that were starting to experiment with gender, and, you know, teenagers, kids in their 20s at those shows. I can't imagine, because this was the place that they felt safe, you know. Things were not as far along, and I don't think they were far along at all there. If we were being called homo-fascists when we were going to play St. Petersburg, and that was in 2016.
You know, it makes place to be slaves. We make place to be slaves. Memory is a clock. The aging mechanism of our lives. Memory is a clock. An aging mechanism of the lives. Are you listening well? Names are given in order to control. Names are given in order to control. Listen carefully. To reduce, to comprehend these forces of nature, to destroy ownership and failure. This is the place to come. This is the race of the greyhounds of the future. That's all of you. The greyhounds of the future. Greyhounds of the future.
So this seems like it was a beautiful experience for you. Yeah. That is still with you, obviously, through your friends who are still. And when you approach engineering here now with all the beautiful equipment and space that we have, how does that carry with you? Do you take any of the work that you did with Psychic TV into the way you think about your work now?
There was a certain amount of real kindness in that band, which was a wonderful thing. And it made us, you know, we were kind to each other. We took care of each other. It just made us want to work harder to make the thing, to make what we were doing better or interesting or just more rewarding creatively. So I think that somehow plays into what I do now and was still doing at the time. It's like, well, I'm not going to like butter up who I'm working with. Be like, oh my God, you know, I'm being disingenuous. Be like, oh my God, like you're so amazing, and I love your shoes, and I love what you chose to eat for lunch. But you know, in terms of being trying to be like kind and patient and making people feel secure in a place where they have to be vulnerable, you know, like I learned a lot of that from feeling like like being on stage, you know, and us being like, I don't know what we're going to do. Like we're vulnerable right now, even though there's a bunch of people that are here to see us, but like, we're going to take care of each other. We're going to get through it. You know, Jen also didn't, what she said, some people are, most people are going for success. We're not. Jen didn't have to be. Jen could have just walked in after the band was rehearsing for 2 hours, or like, okay, Jen, we have all of these songs ready to go. And she could, sort of be a prima donna. I wouldn't have enjoyed it. I probably wouldn't have lasted that long, but could have just been cold and walked in and walked out and barely said hello to the band. And then we went on tour. It was totally a business-like proposition. But, instead, she would send me, she would find the most ridiculous birthday cards, like the ones you open up, there's like a spring and like, you know, like half of the chihuahuas going this way and there's a spring and then half of the other chihuahuas going that way. And it's like happy birthday. It's like the corniest stuff, but she loved going to what she called the grocery store, by the way. It was just a CVS down the street from her, but I always called, can I get a grocery store? She loved doing stuff like that. She got such a big kick out of it. And I would always know, because she had such distinctive handwriting, obviously. It was just this big envelope. It was just stuffed with you know, this oversized Hallmark card. I was like, all right, she doesn't have to do any of these things. But we, you know, I still have a voicemail from her. She called like right before I became a father, you know, and telling me, because she has 2 daughters that are around my age, you know. And, you know, it was like, just offering me words of encouragement in a very loving and kind and real way that, again, it went beyond, you know, and obviously, like, it went beyond just, wow, we had this great experience playing music together. It was just like, okay, there's consideration, there's care there. And how can I transfer that to what we're doing in here? There's a lot of ways. I'm not buying Chihuahua cards for everybody I work with, but
cancel my booking.
Yeah. Never mind. But that sort of, I guess, how do I put it? Just, it's like consideration. It's consideration for others, really.
Man, that ties greatly into what I wanted to ask you next, right? Because you work with a lot of local bands, right? A lot of up and coming bands that I think are just brilliant, you know, and you obviously do, otherwise you wouldn't work with them, you know, like off the top, you know, we talk about Big Bliss and Activity and Russian Baths, and I mean, there's a lot of them, right? But they all kind of say the same thing about you, you know. There's a common thread of, well, Jeff just kind of got what we wanted to do, right?
Yeah.
And that's really hard to do. How do you get what people want to do? How do you get in their heads?
I usually go to their house when they're sleeping, and I just kind of stare. I'm like, just put it in my... No.
Oh, cool.
My website is... that really depends on the project. I think, you know, I think I have like pretty decent people skills, and again, I'm talking about a lot about making people feel comfortable, but it depends a lot on the project, you know. And a lot of times I will ask bands before we even start working together, like once we're having the initial conversation, maybe it's email, maybe we had a meeting somewhere, or if it was the pandemic, maybe we had a Zoom meeting. You know, the next time you guys get together and rehearse, just turn on, you know, like send me some voice memos. It doesn't have to be an Academy Award-winning recording, you know, or Academy Award-winning recording. I work in the recording industry,
This
folks.
is an Academy Award-winning recording.
Maybe I'm going to go work at UPS. No, it does not have to win a Grammy. No one cares. I literally say, I'm like, I don't care what it sounds like. I just want to get a feel for what's happening in the room. It's not like, oh, I can't believe the drummer screwed that up. I was like, I don't care. If there's like 2 minutes of you guys talking about what you're going to order at the Mexican place after you finish rehearsal, it's fine. Just so I can get an idea. I try and see the band. And, you know, I try and see the band live. And at this point, like, I've probably already seen them, or I might know somebody in the band, or have worked with somebody in the band. Like, I've been doing this for a long time. Like, working with Russian Baths came about, obviously, because of Jess Rees, I met her through Activity. And then I find that it's cliche, but it's like the records that you work on, those are the ones you feel very good about. Like, that's your business card, hopefully. And, you know, those things... That's why I'm always focused on getting it. I want to get it, not for my own, like, haha, I got this band, but it's like, okay, if I'm going to be able to understand what's going on before we get in the room, I can start thinking about approaches. Are we using a click? All this is always subject to change, but it's like, I don't know, I could totally hear this happening here, or, hey, guys, and again, I don't do this every time. It's more, you know, if we're talking about like producing, beforehand, or if it's like a certain kind of relationship. Like with Activity, I went to a couple. They sent me some demos, and Travis did a bunch of demos at home. And I remember having like a few like, oh, like what happens if you like pulled this section out, like arrangement type things.
Yeah.
You know, and I always arrive, sort of arrive at those suggestions as like, look, take it or leave it. I mean, you can. I think this might be cool, but it's your music. I'm hearing it with a impartial ear, though. You know, like I haven't been rehearsing it. I haven't been playing it. I think it also shows care. It's like, you know, I'm not just going like, all right, yeah, cool. Like, why don't you guys get here at noon? I haven't really met you guys before. And you walk in and I'm like plugging in the first mic cable and everyone's got like their guitars. We've been there. We've been there, you know?
Is there a Jeff Berner sound? Like you know what I'm saying? Like you go to certain people for certain things.
Yeah.
Are you?
I hope not. I mean, I always, I know what you mean.
No. But but that answer is also an approach, right? There are some people who don't want to be heard in the recording, like their personality.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, there are things I like doing. It's like tools in the toolbox, right? It doesn't mean that I have to use this like the same mic on a guitar every time, or like that RCA BK5 mic I was telling you about before, which I love.
That's his favorite mic.
That's
not your favorite mic. That's the mic you're emotionally attached to.
No, that's actually a different RCA microphone. I know, and it's right on the other side of that wall. It's a very sweet, sentimental story, but which I can tell, of course. But it's interesting. Like, obviously, I'm very lucky to work in a place like this. There's a lot of different things to use, and over time, like you start to realize like what's important and what isn't. Just because there are two 67s here doesn't mean I have to. There's 3 or 4 actually. Doesn't mean I have to use them on this thing every time because we have them. It's like, so I don't know. I guess to answer, I mean, there are things that I prefer strongly. I love the intersection of, I guess, traditional rock band and then that sort of murky, hazy area where it's like there's damaged kind of sounding electronics happening. There's low end that's like, you know, gonna make the subwoofer in your Nissan Sentra like rattle in the Walmart parking lot. Mm-hmm. I like I guess I like something that has some sort of like character to it and just forces you to sit up and take notice. But while I feel like I'm going to get canceled for this, but because I do enjoy a bunch of his work, I even enjoy a bunch of his principles. But if I had to do Steve Albini's job, mm-hmm. Like if that was the only choice where it's like, just do this, and this is the one way that you do this, and this is the one way that you do this, and you don't change it. I don't think I could, and that was the only thing I could do. I don't think I would be interested in recording.
Yeah, that's fair.
And it's known, like he's got it figured out, and he has his principles, and I think he's talented, and I think I know there's a bunch of records that I really love that I enjoy what he's done on them. Yeah. But at that point, it's like that's not where it's exciting for me.
Yeah,
at all,
that's not exciting for you. Who are a couple of engineers and producers that you really like their approach?
Yeah.
Maybe you've either worked with or that you have seen through the televisions or the YouTubes.
Yeah, through the internet telephone. I mean, man, there's a lot. There's a lot, like, you know, from like Jeff Emmerich with the Beatles, like where, you know, I feel like the Beatles were all like, you know, sort of stoned and at that point, like stoned and saying, all right, Jeff, like, come on, like push it a little bit more. He's like, I don't know if I'm allowed to put the speaker like this, the mic this close to the speaker. It's like, yeah, whatever.
It will overmodulate.
Yeah, exactly. And they did it anyway, and it was awesome. I mean, like a more recent example would be somebody like John Congleton, who is just really, really great, I think. And he's also someone that I've heard him make, he's made some poppier records, which is no knock. He's made some poppier records as of lately, but he's also made like crazy, insane metal records that don't sound like there's a quarter taped to the bass drum pedal, and like no bass. But even with that, what I enjoyed about some of those records is that they were really fucking heavy, but it wasn't let's scoop all the mids out of the guitars, and again, like we're just gonna be like attack on the kick, and the toms are gonna be super comically loud, and it just sounds like a parody of every metal record that came before it.
So in these great bands that you worked with, they run the gambit of kind of sonic territory. Some of them definitely sound like you could put them on the same bill, but they don't sound like each other. Do you feel like in this era that there is a wave of a certain type of sound that is emerging post-COVID New York, or kind of like in the early 2000s, those bands sounded different from each other. You'd look at like the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, TV on the Radio, stuff like that. They didn't sound the same, but they obviously were coming from the same place at the same time, and you could say, okay, this is the sound of this time.
I don't know if I'm necessarily like seeing a strong sign of, well, now this is what's happening, or like this is there's always scenes, and there are always like you said, like those bands you mentioned, and plus I don't know if you're familiar with that band Stuyedeyed, which they go by Sty. We just finished a record together, and that's like the B room upstairs, which we were looking at. I tracked them, the whole band, 2 drummers. I thought we were going to fall through the second floor because I was just like, what is going on here? You guys are insane. But they're taking huge steps where, like as an example, it's like they're moving on from like garage rocky stuff, like they're putting in like messed up electronics. There's a lot of like, I did a lot of like kind of like dub delay stuff on the record in a way that's not like, oh cool, like someone's doing a bad Lee Scratch Perry impression, but like it still feels like them. I don't think anybody can do a Lee Scratch Perry impression, but it's still absolutely them because they're pushing so hard to do something different, and I say that with pride because they're really talented and I love those guys. But as far as like a cohesive scene, I'm not certain yet. I think people are still feeling stuff out. In terms of it's 2023, middle 2023. I think people are still like figuring out what's feasible. In this post everybody stay home kind of world.
I can tell you what I'd love to see, right? First of all, what you said, I'd love to see people experimenting and just doing different things that they maybe haven't done before. But I also want to see more depression. And the reason I mean, during COVID and during the lockdown, even before that, these are like economic downturn, rough times, right? And especially for people who are of a certain age, like later Gen Z through millennial, the whole lifetime has been tumultuous and crazy. The politics of our country are very depressing and rough, right? When someone comes out with a album and it's like super upbeat and fun and let's go party, I couldn't think of something that I'm less interested in. No, even if that's your life. Yeah, you know what I mean.
I was certainly not interested in partying and throwing confetti in the air at that point.
Yeah, and I feel like even now, at least the musicians I know, the friends I know, are having issues making ends meet, having issues finding work, having issues mentally from being inside for years at a time and not seeing their family. People have passed away in everyone's family. So I mean, I find it really odd when that isn't reflected at all in music, and that is reflected in the groups we were talking about. That's not I'm not saying it's depressing music, but it definitely is darker music
of a darker fact. And I mean, I'm I think I'm just drawn to that. To me, it's just it's that type of thing is just so emotionally resonant. And as someone that's struggled with depression on and off for most of his life, like no stranger to that. But I think I'm drawn towards that. Like, there's a few moments on that first Activity record where, and it's not even me having like inside baseball knowledge of the lyrics, but it's so heavy and it's so lyrically heavy, and obviously that was written and was finished pre-pandemic. It can just provoke a reaction to me, but I'm drawn to it,
See, all the doors are locked, bloody clocks, inky blocks. A gentleman with dying phone says he hears a trumpet tones. Futuristic, made of dust, mumbling to pewter box. Here, houses spread and swell, literal hell, literal hell.
I like that stuff.
Weirdos.
I know. Bunch of sad weirdos we are.
But I want to hear one thing.
Yeah.
I really want to hear the microphone story.
Let's see, where do I start with this one? I get a package in the mail from my uncle. My uncle lives up in Maine. I was like, oh, my Uncle Doug sent me something. So I pull it out, and, it's in, like, packing peanuts, which are packing peanuts are the worst thing in the universe. And then it was like a Russian nesting doll of a microphone. It was like a box and then a smaller box. I was like, did he send me like a cookie or something? Because I thought we were going to get, and I pull out this beautiful RCA 77, which is a ribbon mic that was, this particular model was made between 1940 and 1950. I open it up, and he has a note in there. He's like, hey, I got this from your dad years and years and years ago, and I just had it sitting around. I figured you could probably make some music with that. So, okay, incredibly kind, instead of like sitting on a shelf in his garage. It's a beautiful sounding microphone. But my parents met at college. They went to SUNY Oneonta. They met when my father was the head of the radio station, and my mother came in with like one of her girlfriends to audition for a show. And at some point, I guess they had changed the equipment over in the radio station. My father was like, oh, wait, don't throw that out. Not being like, oh, my God, this was 1974, 1975. Not like, oh, my God, this is a valuable ribbon mic, because people were just throwing those in the garbage. Yeah. But my father, up until I was born, a little bit after that, was a disc jockey. So he thought, okay, I could use this, because that was their on-air microphone. He's like, I could use this, if you need to make a demo at home, right? Or just that would come in handy. And I think he might have used it a couple times, then passed it along to his brother, sort of like, hey, you got a house full of stuff. Do you want some of this stuff?
More stuff?
Yeah. But that microphone was there, like when my parents first met. We're going on, I think they probably met like nearly 50 years ago. So. And it's a beautiful sounding microphone. It's not like, oh, it's a really nice story, but that mic kind of sounds like garbage. Yeah.
Which is a valid reason to keep something around.
Oh, absolutely. Even if,
if you are somebody that someone looks up to as an engineer and producer, and they want to do what you do one day, maybe they might not be younger, maybe they just haven't started yet.
Yeah.
It's a different time now. How would you think they should start?
Oh, that's a good question. It's, as opposed to when I started and was working on consoles, which I still work on consoles when I'm tracking, but...
This is the smallest room. We do have to say this. Yeah. This is actually a mixing room. There's multiple larger studios upstairs that are being used right now for tubular bells and trumpets and all sorts of stuff.
Tubular bells and Sesame Street.
That we can't disturb. So,
having never gone to school for engineering, I only hear like people like, oh, it's not worth it, but I learned some things, but it's not worth it. Okay. I think in this day and age, if I would say like learn whatever DAW you're using, if you're using Ableton, cool, learn that. If you're using Logic, I mean, if I was starting out, like I would buy Logic because it's like $300 and you have everything in there and it's great.
It's $200.
$200. Steve Jobs. And you know, and as opposed to paying like $600 for Pro Tools and then like having to renew your perpetual license, whatever. Come after me, Avid. I still use your product. You can have access to all that technology in your laptop, on your iPad, on your iPhone. It's like, okay, learn how to operate that program really fast. But how do you learn how to operate that program really fast? It's like, oh, do you practice punching yourself in? Sort of. But you got to also get in real life situations, even if it's a matter of like recording your buddy or, you know, recording a band, going in a band's practice space and like recording them for, say, like, you know, I'm just trying to like get my chops up, because not only will that, you know, in the heat of the moment, it'll like, it's not just like sitting there and going like, oh man, like I got to look up that key shortcut again. I don't remember what clip to region is or whatever. You're there working with people, and that's the other side of it is, and I feel like I keep coming back to this, is you have to really learn or develop a sense for human beings outside of, like, oh man, I love your music, or like, I don't think this music is any good. You know what? It doesn't matter. Like it matters intensely to me, and I am so lucky. Those bands that we were both mentioning that I've gotten to work with, and a lot more that we didn't mention. It's like, I'm just very lucky right now to be in a position to really only have to work on stuff that not only I like, but like I am really attached to, you know, and it took a long time to get there. Recorded a lot of things, but even if it's something you don't think is any good, you don't think is being executed, you think the music's cool, you don't think it's being executed well, it's like, in that moment, you're not the rock critic for, I don't know, is Rolling Stone still a magazine? It
is.
Oh, that's good. Good for them. You're not the arbiter of taste. That's the last thing you're going to do, you know, is make a judgment. And if you do that, then you're just going to get bitter and jaded and pissed off and like not really enjoy the process anymore, you know, which that would be the saddest thing of all.
Yeah.
You know, the other side to it is like find a way to be around. I mean, if I know, like, obviously interning for free is not a easy or realistic thing, especially if you live in New York City or basically anywhere. But if you can find a way to put yourself in a situation where, even if, you know, you got to go out and take care of the lunch orders and clean the toilets when you first get there, and like just kind of sit there and know that you're not going to do anything for a couple hours, and put your phone far away from you, because I'm not knocking any interns here, but when I see an intern come in and sit down and start scrolling through Instagram, I'm a scroller too.
You want to rage?
I don't want to rage, but I'm more like, well, what are you, if you're not, like, what are you doing here? And because what I tell interns, and this was just my experience, you know, watching my friend Chris's sessions. Chris, who is part owner of Studio G, by the way.
The same Chris?
Yeah.
Aforementioned first studio Chris?
He and I moved down to New York City together and built our first studio. And I would go to, I worked at Starbucks for about 2.5 weeks. I was awful at Starbucks.
How are you at spelling people's names?
Not very good. I don't even think I got that far. They put me on like the cold drink machine, and I had no idea like what to pour in. It was like the summer. People were ordering like a bunch of like
Chinos.
Yeah, I don't know. They were ordering pants drinks. Chinos. It's dad joke. Sorry. But I would go to any of his sessions, and you know, I would get off of work and go there at like 4, and he would be working until like 10 o'clock. And I would watch, and oftentimes, you know, I was like learning how to do all of this stuff. So I get the point I'm trying to make, and then that place closed, and Chris's, again, I just saw him this morning. We've been friends for 150 years. I'm really grateful to him. that's the way you grow. You just, I think, for me anyway, you can work on it at home as much as you can, but you got to get outside and start like testing those skills and testing the ideas that you're sort of positing forth in your own head on other people. Because otherwise you're going to be somebody that records yourself at home, which is fine and awesome, but not if you want to record other people.
Not if the goal is to be Jeff Berner.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, and I think a lot of it too is just knowing, how do I put this? It's like, and I said something to this effect before, but like knowing that the work that you put in, it's going to pay itself forward. Not in terms of like, oh man, like I just bought a Lamborghini after making that last record. It's like, no, this band, these people, this band was hanging out with this band, this guy was hanging out with this guy. It's like, oh, you know what? Like if you want to make a record, like you should go like check out like this guy Jeff. Like that's where I get my, like I don't advertise, you know, like. And I don't say that being like, I'm so amazing, but that's how this kind of thing works, because it's really word of mouth reference, you know. So I mean, I still think about that, but I would work so hard. Like that's the foot you want to get in the door, because once you're like, oh, hey, you know, I just recorded with this guy at this studio and he was super awesome. You should give him a call, you know. And he's just starting out, like. So he's probably more affordable, and you know, all like that's the way you just keep trying to make records with people, and just work as hard as you can.
So to sum up everything, you've been doing this for a long time, and it's hard to get excited by things, you know, not artists, not music, but just like the general job, right? What new stuff? What like new concepts or new ways of thinking or new approach that you have that you are now doing in life is exciting to you?
I got to tell you, this is still really exciting for me. Like it has rarely stopped being that way. In part because it's always different, in part because of the records I've gotten to work on in the past bunch of years. It's always exciting. I can say with all sincerity, like it's still really exciting for me. Like the basic tracking moment where you get all the drum sounds happening, and like you record a little bit, and then they come in, they're like, yeah, or what? And I'm like, oh, okay, well, we'll try this instead. And then you get the band sort of like balanced out on the console and get the first, and they do the first take. And when they finally like get the take that they want to come in and hear, and like you're just kind of like listening, like that's some pure like endorphins for me still, you know.
Amazing.
I would be remiss to point out someone else that has been like really influential, not only in that, in other ways, but like in that sense specifically, is one of the other owners here, my friend Tony Mamoni, who that guy, he's, you know, older than I am, and you would think he would have every right to be like the most jaded. He's been making music. He founded the studio in '93. He was a touring musician like from 75, 76. You would think he had every right to be like jaded, bitter, pissed off, over it, doesn't get it, angry, doesn't want to go with the changes. That guy loves music so much and is so excited, like truly excited about music still. The prospect of playing it, he and I have played in a couple things together, the prospect of making it with people, you know, and working on people's records. It's like, I think about this a lot when it comes to what I'm working on, even if it's, you know, it's occasionally darker. And I get this a lot from Tony, joy. There's a lot of joy in the process. Yeah.
That's awesome, Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you. My goodness.